All right. So last time we did we did Euthyphro. Now we're going to be doing what is chronologically, like in the story sense, kind of the sequel, where Socrates arrives at his trial. Although philosophically, these two do tend to be fairly different texts about different things. So for those people that don't know, Socrates was basically put on trial by his fellow Athenians because they hated him. True facts.
As you do. These people you hate.
So this we're going to be going over the. He's going to be including the like charges and stuff. But let's go ahead and just jump right into the text because we've. I'd like to keep this around an hour. So let's go ahead and get started. I do not know, men of Athens, how my accusers affected you. As for me, I was almost carried away in spite of myself, so persuasively did they speak. And yet, hardly anything of what they said is true. Of the many lies they told, one in particular surprised me, namely, that you should be careful not to be deceived by an accomplished speaker like me. That they were not ashamed to be immediately proved wrong by the facts, when I show myself not to be an accomplished speaker at all, that I thought was the most shameless on their part, unless, indeed, they call an accomplished speaker a man who speaks the truth. If they mean that, I would agree that I am an orator, but not after their manner, for indeed, as I say, practically nothing they said was true. From me you will hear the whole truth, though not, by Zeus, gentlemen, expressed in embroidered and stylized phrases like theirs, but things spoken at random and expressed in the first words that come to mind. For I put my trust in the justice of what I say, and let none of you expect anything else. I would not be fitting at my age, as it might be for a young man, to toy with words when I appear before you. One thing I do ask and beg of you, gentlemen. If you hear me making my defense in the same kind of language as I am accustomed to use in the marketplace by the bankers' tables, where many of you have heard me and elsewhere, do not be surprised or create a disturbance on that account. The position is this. This is my first appearance in a law court, at the age of 70. I am therefore simply a stranger to the manner of speaking here. Just as if I were really a stranger, you would certainly excuse me if I spoke in that dialect and manner in which I had been brought up, so to present my request seems a just one. So for you to pay no attention to my manner of speech, be it for better or worse, but to concentrate your attention on whether what I say is just or not, for the excellence of a judge lies in this, as that of a speaker lies in telling the truth. It is right for me, gentlemen, to defend myself first against the first lying accusations made against me, and my first accuser. Okay, actually, before we go on, do we want to talk a bit about some of the rhetorical tactics he's doing here, or do we want to get straight into the philosophy?
Well, I mean, on the topic of the rhetorical tactics, he's. I mean, it's difficult to say what rhetorical tactics he's using exactly without seeing the rest. I mean, like, he's basically saying.
Well, I mean, in his introduction at the very least. So one of the
Yeah.
things that he did is he's sort of like framing himself against his opponent. His opponent is much more readily speaking the language of the courts, as he's trying to imply here. So what he's trying to say is that I am not a good speaker compared to my opponent. My opponent is a better speaker than I am, whereas I'm just going to be telling the truth. So basically, they're trying to instill suspicion on the part of their opponent for their eloquence of speech. Now, as we generally are willing to accept the truth content of what one says and how one says it are generally uncorrelated. They don't really have to connect. You can say the truth eloquently, you can say lies poorly, or vice versa. But he's trying to make that connection, that straightforward, plain language is going to be what is true, and you have to understand what is just through his simple language, whereas the eloquent language is not one that's necessarily trying to speak the truth, but one that's trying to create its own narrative, is the narrative he's creating. Moving on. It is right for me, gentlemen, to defend myself first against the first-lying accusations made against me and my accusers, and then against the later accusations and the later accusers. There have been many who have accused me to you for many years now, and none of their accusations are true. These I fear much more than I fear Anytus and his friends, though they too are formidable. These earlier ones, however, are more so, gentlemen. They got hold of most of you from childhood, persuaded you and accused me quite falsely, saying that there is a man called Socrates, a wise man, a student of all things in the sky and below the earth, who makes the worst argument the stronger. Those who spread that rumor, gentlemen, are my dangerous accusers, for their hearers believe that those who study these things do not even believe in the gods. Moreover, these accusers are numerous and have been at it a long time. Also, they spoke to you at an age when you would most readily believe them, some of you being children and adolescents, and they won their case by default as there was no defense. What is most absurd in all of this is that one cannot even know or mention their names unless one of them is a writer of comedies. I think the reference he's making there is there was a play called The Clouds or something like that did have a cameo of Socrates in it. Not literally him going back then, but he was written into the play and kind of put in not such a great light. For historical context, Socrates was very much disliked by a lot of people in Athens. Those who maliciously and slanderously persuaded you, who also, when persuaded themselves, then persuaded others, all those are most difficult to deal with. One cannot bring one of them into court or refute him. One must simply fight with shadows, as it were, in making one's defense, and cross-examine when no one answers. I want you to realize, too, that my accusers are of two kinds. Those of you accused me recently, and the old ones I mentioned. And to think that I must first defend myself against the latter, for you have also heard their accusations first, and to a much greater extent than the more recent. Very well, then. I must surely defend myself and attempt to uproot from your minds in so short a time the slander that has resided there so long. I wish this may happen, if it is in any way better for you and me, and that my defense may be successful, but I think this is very difficult, and I am fully aware of how difficult it is. Even so, let the matter proceed as the god may wish, but I must obey the law and make my defense. Let us then take up the case from the beginning. What is the accusation from which arose the slander in which Meletus trusted when he wrote out the charge against me? What did they say when they slandered me? I must, as if they were my actual prosecutors, read the affidavit they would have sworn. It goes something like this. Socrates is guilty of wrongdoing in that he busies himself studying things in the sky and below the earth. He makes the worse into the stronger argument, and he teaches these same things to others. You have seen this yourselves in the comedy of Aristophanes, a Socrates swinging about there, saying he was walking on air and talking a lot of other nonsense about things of which I know nothing at all. I do not speak in contempt of such knowledge. If someone is wise in these things, let Meletus bring more cases against me. But, gentlemen, I have no part in it, and on this point I call upon the majority of you as witness. I think it right that those of you who have heard me conversing, and many of you have, should tell each other if any one of you has ever heard me discussing any such subjects to any extent at all. From this you will learn that the other things said about me by the majority are of the same kind. Not one of them is true. And if you have heard from anyone that I undertake to teach people and charge a fee for it, that is not true either. Yet I think it is fine to be able to teach people, as Gorgias of Leontini does, and Prodicus of Cheo? I don't know if that's Cheo or Cheo, and Hippias of Elis. Each of these men can go to any city and persuade the young, who can keep company with any one of his fellow citizens they want, without paying to leave company of these, to join with themselves, pay them a fee, and be grateful to them besides. Indeed, I learned that there is another wise man from Paris who is visiting us, for I met a man who spent more money on sophists than everybody else put together, Callias, the son of Hipponicus. So I asked him, he has 2 sons. Callias, I said, if your sons were colts or calves, we could find and engage a supervisor for them who would make them excel in their proper qualities, some horse breeder or farmer. Now, since they are men, whom do you have in mind to supervise them? Who is an expert in the kind of excellence, the human and social kind? I think you must have given thought to this since you have sons. Is there such a person, I asked, or is there not? Certainly there is, he said. Who is he? I asked. What is his name? Where is he from? And what is his fee? His name, Socrates, is Avenus. He comes from Paris, and his fee is 5 minas. I thought Avenus a happy man if he really possesses this art and teaches for so moderate a fee. Certainly I would pride and preen myself if I had this knowledge, but I do not have it, gentlemen. One of you might perhaps interrupt me and say, but Socrates, what is your occupation? From where have these slanders come? For surely, if you didn't out-busy yourself with something out of the common, all these rumors and talk would not have arisen unless you did something other than most people. Tell us what it is, that we may not speak inadvisably about you. Anyone who says that seems to be right, and I will try to show you what has caused this reputation and slander. Listen then. Perhaps some of you will think I am jesting, but be sure that all that I shall say is true. What has caused my reputation is none other than a certain kind of wisdom. What kind of wisdom? Human wisdom, perhaps. It may be that I really possess this, while those whom I mentioned just now are wise with a wisdom more than human. Else I cannot explain it, for I certainly do not possess it, and whoever says I do is lying and speaks to slander me. Do not create a disturbance, gentlemen, even if you think I am boasting, for the story I shall tell does not originate with me, but I will refer you to a trustworthy source. I shall call upon the god at Delphi, as witness to the existence and nature of my wisdom, if it be such. You know Chariaphon. He was my friend from youth, and the friend of most of you, as he shared your exile and your return. You surely know the kind of man he was, how impulsive in any course of action. He went to Delphi at one time and ventured to ask the oracle. As I say, gentlemen, do not create a disturbance. When he does that, he's probably just trying to quiet down people that are protesting in the crowd, I believe. This is, I believe, Plato's best recounting of the actual trial of Socrates. So a bit more historical context. Early Plato work tends to be accepted to be Socratic. Like, the early stuff that Plato did was basically him retelling accounts of Socrates, or taking things he learned from Socrates and putting them sort of in his own words. As he continued on, while he continued to do the Socratic dialogue where he would use Socrates as a character, he did develop his own style of philosophy. Apology is, I believe, a somewhat earlier work where he's still mostly recounting things of Socrates rather than originating things of his own and just using Socrates as a fictional character for his for a mouthpiece. Like, I'm pretty sure the Republic is significantly more to do with Plato than it is Socrates, but a lot of the earlier work is more Socratic than it is Platonic. Where was I? He went to Delphi at one time and ventured to ask the oracle. He asked if any man was wiser than I, and the Pythian replied that no one was wiser. Chariaphon is dead, but his brother will testify to you about this. Consider that I tell you this because I would inform you about the origin of the slander. When I heard of this reply, I asked myself, whatever does the god mean? What is his riddle? I am very conscious that I am not wise at all. What, then, does he mean by saying I am the wisest? For surely he does not lie. It is not illegitimate for him to do so. For a long time, I was at a loss to his meaning. Then I reluctantly turned to some such investigation as this. I went to one of those reputed wise, thinking that there, if anywhere, I could refute the oracle and to say it, this man is wiser than I, but you said I was. Then, when I examined this man, there is no need for me to tell you his name, he is one of our public men. My experience was something like this. I thought he appeared wise to many people and especially to himself, but he was not. I then tried to show him that he thought himself wise, but that he was not. As a result, he came to dislike me, and so did many of the bystanders. So I withdrew and thought to myself, I am wiser than this man. It is likely that neither of us know anything worthwhile, but he thinks he knows something when he does not, whereas I do not know, neither do I think I know. So I am likely to be wiser than he to this small extent, that I do not think I know what I do not know. After this, I approached another man, one of those thought to be wiser than he, and I thought the same thing, and so I came to be disliked both by him and by many others. After that, I proceeded systematically. I realized, to my sorrow and alarm, that I was getting unpopular, but I thought that I must attach the greatest importance to the God's oracle, so I must go to all those who had any reputation for knowledge to examine its meaning. And by the dog, gentlemen of the jury, for I must tell you the truth, I experienced something like this. In my investigation in service of the God, I found that those who had the highest reputation were nearly the most deficient, while those who were thought to be inferior were more knowledgeable. I must give you an account of my journeyings as if they were labors I had undertaken to prove the oracle irrefutable. After the politicians, I went to the poets, the writers of tragedies, and the dithyrambs and the others, intending in their case to catch myself being more ignorant than they. So I took up those poems which they seemed to have taken the most trouble, and asked them what they meant, in order that I might at the same time learn something from them. I am ashamed to tell the truth, gentlemen, but I must. Almost all the bystanders might have explained the poems better than the authors could. I soon realized the poets do not compose their poems with knowledge, but by some inborn talent and by inspiration, like seers and prophets who also say many fine things without understanding of what they say. The poets seem to have had a similar experience. At the same time, I saw that, because of their poetry, they thought themselves very wise men in other respects, which they were not. So there again I withdrew, thinking that I had the advantage over them same advantage over them as I had over the politicians. Finally, I went to the craftsmen, for I was conscious of knowing practically nothing, and I knew that I would find that they had knowledge of many fine things. In this I was not mistaken. They knew things I did not know, and to that extent they were wiser than I. But, gentlemen of the jury, the good craftsman seemed to me to have the same fault as the poets. Each of them, because of his success at his craft, thought himself very wise in other most important pursuits, and this error of theirs overshadowed the wisdom they had, so that I asked myself, on behalf of the oracle, whether I should prefer to be as I am, with neither their wisdom nor their ignorance, or to have both. The answer I gave myself in the oracle was that it was to my advantage that I am to be as I am. As a result of this investigation, gentlemen of the jury, I acquired much unpopularity, of a kind that is hard to deal with and is a heavy burden. Many slanders came from these people, and a reputation for wisdom, for in each case the bystanders thought that I myself possessed the wisdom that I proved that my interlocutor did not have. What is probable, gentlemen, is the fact that the god is wise, and his oracle response meant the human wisdom is worth little or nothing, and that when he says this man, Socrates, he is using my name as an example, as if he said, this man among you, mortals, is wisest who, like Socrates, understands that his wisdom is worthless. So even now I continue this investigations as the gods bade me, and I go around seeking out anyone, citizen or stranger, whom I think wise. Then, if I do not think he is, I come to the assistance of the god and show him that he is not wise. Because of this occupation, I do not have the leisure to engage in public affairs to any extent, nor indeed to look after my own, but I live in great poverty because of my service to the god. So, gonna double back to the craftsman section real quick. We have a term for that in modern times. Does anyone know what that is? Max, if you're... Okay.
I cannot remember it.
It's called the Dunning-Kruger Effect.
Yes.
So, the Dunning-Kruger Effect is basically the term in psychology that they use to explain the phenomenon that is pretty prevalent, where if someone is an expert of something, they think that their expertise makes them authority in other things. A very popular example of this is Neil deGrasse Tyson, who is an expert in astrophysics, and then will often try and give his input into other fields, which he doesn't really know what he's talking about. Most famously and exact of this, I believe, was one time he it was talking about whether or not a woman's first time was supposed to be painful, quote unquote, And he said if there was ever a species for whom sex was painful, they would go extinct. And then a number of biologists responded to him, pointing out several species of animals who sex for them was painful. So just straight up incorrect there.
I mean, so he's an example of the Dunning-Kruger effect, but that's not actually the Dunning-Kruger effect as I understand it. And actually, I'm not sure if he is describing the Dunning-Kruger effect here.
All right, what do you think it is then?
As I understand it, the Dunning-Kruger effect is the case where you know a little about a subject, and as a result, think you know a lot. So for example, someone who has an introduction to philosophy course and thinks, oh, I know everything there is to know about philosophy. I'm an expert on philosophy. I can discuss it at length in dinner parties. And yeah, it might, impress people who know nothing about philosophy. But in actuality, the more you learn about a subject past that initial confidence peak, the more you realize you don't know. And as a result, your confidence quickly plummets until it eventually starts to slowly rise again, the more you learn.
Oh, nope, you're right. There is I could have sworn this was a Dunning-Kruger effect. Bias results from an internal illusion in people of low ability and from external misperception in people of high ability. That is, the miscalibration of incompetence stems from an error about the self, whereas the miscalibration of the highly competent stems from an error about others. Self-awareness, meta-recognition. Mathematical critique. Okay, well, I'm going to go ahead and put that down in my notes real quick. Oh, whoops. I think I might have accidentally been recording just a blank notepad. Forgot to shrink that. Alright. Look into psych effect. Expertise thinks higher of self. Because expert in one field, but not others. Alright, so that I'm going to have to look into. We're certainly not going to get through the apology today. We're about halfway through our time almost. So I'm going to try and look into that either tonight or tomorrow, and I'll bring it to the reading group then.
Yeah, I've certainly heard of this effect, where being an expert in one field leads you to think you're an expert in more. But I have no idea what it's called.
Yeah, like I said, I jotted it down in the notes, so I'm gonna try and look into it.
Okay.
But that is the that's a well recorded psychological phenomenon, as you're aware, Max. So even going as far back as ancient Greece, that was something that they some people seem to notice. Alright, let's see. Furthermore, the young men who follow me around of their own free will, those who have more leisure, the sons of the very rich, take pleasure in hearing people questioned. They themselves often imitate me and try to question others. I think they find an abundance of men who believe they have some knowledge, but know little or nothing. The result is that those whom they question are angry not with themselves, but with me. They say, that man Socrates is a pestilential fellow who corrupts the young. If one asks them what he does and what he teaches to corrupt them, they are silent, as they do not know. But, so as not to appear at a loss, they mention those accusations that are available against all philosophers, about things in the sky and things below the earth, about not believing in the gods, and making the worse the stronger argument. They would not want to tell the truth, I'm sure, that they have been proved to lay claim to knowledge when they know nothing. These people are ambitious, violent, and numerous. They are continually and convincingly talking about me. They have been filling your ears for a long time with vehement slander against me. From them Meletus attacked me, and Anytus and Lycon. Meletus being vexed on behalf of the poets, Anytus on behalf of the craftsmen and politicians, Lycon on behalf of the orators, so that, as I started out by saying, I should be surprised if I could rid you of so much slander in so short a time. That, gentlemen of the jury, is the truth for you. I have hidden or disguised nothing. I know well enough that this is the very conduct that makes me unpopular, and this is proof that what I say is true, that such is the slander against me, and that such are its causes. If you look into this either now or later, this is what you will find. Let this suffice as a defense against the charges of my earlier accusers. After this, I shall try to defend myself against Meletus, that good and patriotic man, as he says he is, and my later accusers. As these are a different lot of accusers, let us again take up their sworn deposition. It goes something like this. Socrates is guilty of corrupting the young, of not believing in the gods in whom the city believes, but in other new spiritual beings. Such is their charge. Let us examine it point by point. So before we move on to the second point, let's go ahead and note down the first argument that Socrates had. Give me one moment.